Some meetings in life are planned by coincidence, and others are scripted by destiny itself. Tonight's story isn't about wealth or power. It's about a man who had everything except peace, and a woman who had nothing left except love. Before we begin, dear viewer, if this story touches your heart, remember to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. Because sometimes, the stories we tell help someone heal what words can't. The night was heavy with rain. Streetlights flickered through misty air, casting gold halos on the puddles that gathered at the bus stop. A few strangers huddled under the shelter, each lost in their own thoughts, the soft patter of rain filling the spaces between them. Among them, a young woman, her dark hair damp, her eyes quiet but alert. She held a baby wrapped in a light blue blanket against her chest, rocking gently, humming under her breath. Her phone glowed dimly in her hand. But she wasn't scrolling, she was waiting. Not for a message. Not even for the bus. She was waiting for strength. Her name was Amora. And this was not where she thought life would bring her. Only a year ago, she had dreams as wide as the sky. A job she loved, a man she trusted, and a promise she thought was unbreakable. But life, it seemed, had rewritten her story, without asking for her permission. A few streets away, a black luxury car cut through the drizzle and came to a slow stop near the intersection. Inside, Ethan Cross, a billionaire known for his precision, control, and cold brilliance, sat in silence. His phone vibrated, lighting up with messages from investors, assistants, and people who wanted his attention. But he ignored them all. For the first time in years, his chest felt tight. Not from stress, but from something he couldn't name. He'd just left a gala in his honor. A celebration of success, champagne, applause, and people who smiled too widely. But the moment he stepped into his car, he felt the hollowness pressing in like fog. He loosened his tie, stared at the windshield, and without thinking, he drove. No destination. No purpose. Just the road and the rain. That's when he saw her. At the bus stop. A woman with a baby in her arms. The sight struck him like lightning. Something in her posture, the curve of her shoulders, the familiar rhythm of how she rocked the child. He slowed down, heart pounding. Amora? It couldn't be. It had been almost 2 years since he'd seen her last. The last time, she had walked out of his penthouse, with nothing but her dignity and a trembling heart. And he, too proud to chase, too stubborn to speak. Let her go. The car stopped by the curb. Ethan stepped out, rain immediately soaking through his navy shirt. His breath fogged as he approached. Every step felt heavier, as if time itself had slowed to watch this moment unfold. When Amora lifted her head, her eyes widened. Not in surprise, but in disbelief. For a second, neither spoke. The rain whispered between them, and the baby shifted softly in her arms. Ethan, she said finally, her voice gentle but distant. He nodded. He looked different, older, maybe, but still carrying that same quiet authority. Only now, there was something else in his eyes. A weariness that success couldn't hide. I didn't think I'd ever see you again, he said, his voice trembling slightly despite his attempt to stay composed. "Life has a way of surprising us," she replied, adjusting the baby's blanket as if to shield her child from his gaze. Ethan's eyes followed the movement. The small hand that peeked out. The soft coo of the baby's breath. "Is that your child?" Amora looked down, then back up, her expression unreadable. "Yes. My son." Her tone was calm. But something flickered in her voice. Something Ethan couldn't name but could feel deep in his chest. He wanted to ask. To say something, anything. But the words caught in his throat. Memories flooded him. The laughter they once shared. The arguments that tore through the walls of their home. And that one night, the night she left. He had chosen his ego over her love. And in that choice, he had lost something priceless. "I didn't know," he started. But his voice faded under the rhythm of the rain. "You didn't ask," Amora said softly. There was no anger in her tone, only truth. Ethan swallowed hard. The baby's eyes opened, wide and curious, locking onto him for the briefest second. And in that moment, something shifted. A strange, piercing ache. As though his soul recognized something his mind refused to believe. He took a step forward. "May I?" he gestured, almost hesitantly. Amora hesitated too. The last time she had trusted him, it cost her everything. But this was different. The rain, the silence, the look in his eyes, it felt real. She nodded, just slightly. Ethan leaned closer, his hand trembling as he brushed the baby's tiny fingers. The child's hand grasped his finger, firmly, instinctively. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cross, the man who built empires, felt his heart break in the most human way possible. Neither spoke for a long time. The bus passed by without stopping. Only the sound of raindrops filled the quiet. Amora's eyes softened. And for a fleeting second, the years between them disappeared. She remembered the man who once made her laugh. Until she forgot the world outside. The man who stayed up all night helping her chase her dreams. And also the man who let her walk away. Because he couldn't choose love over pride. Now, here he was, standing in the rain. His hand still trembling from the touch of their child. She could see it in his eyes, the realization, the regret. The storm inside him. "I should go," she said finally. "The baby needs to rest." He nodded, unable to find words. But as she turned to leave, his voice came. Broken, but sincere. "Amora, wait." She stopped. The blue blanket catching the light as she turned slightly toward him. "I don't know how to fix what I broke," he said. "But please, don't walk away again. Not before I understand." Her gaze lingered on him. The man she had loved, the man she had lost. The man who might finally be ready to listen. But for now, all she said was, "Some things can't be fixed, Ethan. They can only be understood." And with that, she stepped into the night. The sound of rain echoing like applause to a scene no one else would ever witness. But one that would change both their lives forever. When Ethan saw Amora again, time stopped. The woman he once let slip through his fingers stood in the rain. A baby in her arms, a child whose tiny eyes mirrored his own. And though she said nothing, something inside him already knew. But pride and fear built their walls fast. Now, both hearts stood on opposite sides, one waiting to be forgiven, the other too tired to remember how. Ethan didn't go home that night. He drove aimlessly through the rain, his thoughts louder than the thunder above. Every red light felt like a question. How could I not have known? In the privacy of his penthouse, he stood before the vast window overlooking the city he owned, and realized how empty it felt. Money, property, endless awards, they all blurred into silence. He saw his reflection. A man dressed in success, but stripped of meaning. His chest tightened when he remembered the way the baby had gripped his finger. There had been recognition in that touch. Not of face, but of something deeper, blood, maybe, or fate. He poured a drink, but the taste felt wrong. For the first time, he didn't want distraction. He wanted truth. Across town, Amora laid her baby down gently. The tiny chest rose and fell, a rhythm that gave her courage to keep breathing. Her apartment was small, but warm. On the walls hung simple frames, a few memories. A few reminders that joy still existed. She sat by the window, watching the rain fade into dawn. Her phone buzzed with a message. "Unknown number, please. Just talk to me." Her hands trembled slightly. But she didn't reply. She wasn't angry anymore, she was just careful. Once, Ethan's words had been everything. Now, they were only echoes, beautiful, dangerous echoes. She closed her eyes, whispered a prayer for strength, and touched the small gold pendant around her neck, the one he had given her. Before everything fell apart. Inside the pendant was a name, Isaac. The name of the son Ethan didn't know he had. Flashback. 2 years earlier. Ethan and Amora sat on a balcony overlooking the sea, laughing over cheap pizza and expensive dreams. He had promised her a life without limits. She had promised him love without conditions. But somewhere between his business calls and her quiet sacrifices, those promises began to fade. She wanted time. He offered money. She wanted presence. He gave performance. The night they broke apart, she had whispered through tears, "You don't need me, Ethan. You need control." He had watched her leave, believing she'd come back once she calmed down. She never did. And when she discovered she was pregnant, she realized he didn't just lose a lover. He lost the chance to become a father. Days passed. Ethan couldn't shake her image. At work, his assistant noticed his distraction. He signed documents without reading. He cancelled meetings. Finally, he gave in. He asked one of his people to locate her, not through power, but through apology. When she finally answered his call, her voice was calm, too calm. "Ethan, I don't want to disturb your peace." "Amora, you already have." "Ethan, I need to see you." "Amora, why, Ethan? For closure? Or because the silence scares you?" He sighed, realizing how much she still saw through him. "Ethan, because I need to tell you something I never said when you left." There was a long pause. Then softly, she said, "Tomorrow. Noon. The park." It was a clear afternoon. The kind where the world feels washed clean. Children played in the distance. their laughter carrying on the wind. Amora sat on a bench under a tree, her baby asleep in a stroller beside her. When Ethan arrived, he looked human. No tailored suit. No entourage. Just a man in a white shirt and worn expression. They exchanged polite smiles, the kind that ache more than anger. He sat beside her, careful not to crowd her space. For a long moment, they said nothing. Only the sound of birds and the soft creak of the stroller wheels. Ethan, I didn't know. Amora. Amora, you never asked. Ethan, I thought you moved on. Amora, I had to. He looked down, ashamed. Is he mine? Her silence answered him. And that single moment broke him open. Tears filled his eyes, tears he hadn't known he could still shed. He reached out, but stopped halfway, uncertain of permission. Amora, he's your son. His name is Isaac. But you don't have to do anything, Ethan. We're fine. Ethan, that's not what I want to hear. I don't want to do something. I want to be something. His father. Her throat tightened. He said it not like a businessman making a claim, but like a broken man finding his truth. They walked together through the park path, Isaac babbling softly as he woke. Ethan knelt down, smiling for the first time in months. Hey, little man, he said gently. You've got your mother's eyes. Amora watched them, two reflections of the same soul. One born of regret, the other of hope. For the first time, she didn't feel bitterness. Only relief, that at least now, the truth was no longer hidden. As they sat again, Ethan spoke quietly. Do you believe in second chances? She smiled faintly. I used to. Then I learned some wounds don't heal, they just teach. He looked down, nodding. Then let me learn, Amora. Not as your lover, just as a man who finally wants to understand what love actually means. Her heart softened, not enough to trust again, but enough to listen. They sat in silence, watching Isaac reach for the sunlight streaming through the leaves. His laughter filled the air, and for a fleeting moment, all was forgiven, if not forgotten. As the afternoon faded, Ethan turned to her. Let me be there. Not for you or for him. Even if it's just visiting, even if it's small. She looked at him for a long time. The man before her wasn't the Ethan she once knew. He wasn't invincible anymore, and maybe that's what made him real. Okay, she whispered. But this isn't about redemption. It's about responsibility. He nodded slowly, relief softening his features. And as he bent down to kiss Isaac's forehead, a single tear slipped down his cheek, a tear not of guilt, but of grace. That night, Amora wrote in her journal. Maybe forgiveness isn't about forgetting what someone did. Maybe it's about remembering without bitterness. He can't undo the past, but perhaps he can help build what comes next. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his quiet apartment, looking at a photograph of his parents. For the first time, he understood what they meant when they said, love is stewardship, not ownership. He took a deep breath and whispered a prayer, not for success, but for the courage to love right this time. Sometimes, life doesn't give us the endings we expected. It gives us beginnings we didn't know we needed. The rain that once separated them was the same rain that washed away the past. But destiny was not done yet. Because love, when real, never ends at revelation. It continues into transformation. There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than words. When healing doesn't come with apologies, but with consistency. After that day in the park, Ethan knew his life would never be the same. The empire he built suddenly seemed smaller than the sound of his son's laughter. And the woman he had once lost. She was no longer a wound, but a compass guiding him back to what mattered. Mornings felt different now. Instead of waking to emails and calls, Ethan found himself waking to an alarm that meant something new. Visit Isaac. He didn't tell the press. He didn't post it online. It wasn't for the world to see, it was for his soul to rebuild. At first, his visits were short. A few minutes in the park, a few smiles. A few stories told through the gap of time. Amara watched from a distance. Arms crossed, cautious yet curious. She had learned not to believe words easily. But actions had a language all their own. And slowly, Ethan began to speak fluently in it. Children have a way of undoing even the hardest hearts. Isaac, barely 1 year old, became Ethan's greatest teacher. He taught him patience when he refused to nap. Humility when baby food stained his expensive shirts. And joy, simple, sacred joy, when he laughed at nothing at all. There was one afternoon that stayed etched in Ethan's heart forever. He had been trying to assemble a small wooden toy for Isaac, and failing miserably. Amora stood in the doorway, amused. You can run companies but can't fix a toy. He looked up, smiling sheepishly. Guess I'm learning the hard way that love doesn't come with a manual. She laughed, softly, sincerely. And in that laugh, something healed. It wasn't romantic yet, but it was human again. Weeks passed. Ethan began to show up, not just for Isaac, but for everything. He helped with groceries. He repaired the leaking faucet. He asked about her day, not as an excuse for small talk, but because he truly cared. Amora's walls began to tremble. She didn't let them fall, not yet, but they shook enough to let the light in. One evening, she invited him to stay for dinner. It was simple: rice, beans, and laughter. Isaac sat in his high chair, clapping at every spoonful as if celebrating life itself. Ethan looked around the small apartment and felt something sacred. Peace. The one thing his mansions had never given him. You know, he said quietly, this feels like home. Amora smiled without looking up. That's because it's built on truth, not marble. He nodded. And for the first time, he didn't feel the need to fill the silence. One morning, Amora woke up to a note slipped under her door. It wasn't from the mailman. It was from Ethan. Amora, I know I can't erase the years I failed you. But if time is kind, I hope it lets me earn new memories beside you, not to replace what we lost, but to honor what we learned. You once told me love is not control. I finally understand. Love is presence. Love is surrender. Love is what I feel when I see you hold our son. No matter where life leads, I'll keep showing up, even if all I can be is the kind of man our son will never have to unlearn. Ethan. She held the letter close, her tears falling silently on the page. It wasn't about romance anymore. It was about redemption. A few days later, she called him. "We need to talk." Her tone was calm, but serious. They met again, not at the bus stop this time, but at the small coffee shop where they had their first date years ago. He arrived early, nervous. When she walked in, the years seemed to fold back into that first night. The same gentleness in her eyes, but more strength now. She sat down. "I've been watching you, Ethan." "I know," he said quietly. "You've changed." He looked up. "I had to." "For him." "For you." "For myself." She nodded, her gaze softening. "I don't know where this is going. I don't want to promise what I can't give. But I do know this: forgiveness doesn't mean we start over. It means we stop punishing ourselves for what's already been paid for." He swallowed hard. "Then let me earn your trust, slowly, honestly." She smiled faintly. "Then start with breakfast. Tomorrow. Bring pancakes." Weeks turned into months. Little by little, the rhythm of their lives intertwined again. They were not the same people who had broken apart. They were gentler, wiser, realer. The bus stop where it all began became a quiet symbol of grace. Sometimes, Ethan would drive by, roll down the window, and just look at it, remembering the night that changed everything. He no longer saw it as the place of regret. He saw it as the altar where his soul was reborn. One evening, as the sun sank into amber light, Amara and Ethan sat on a park bench, watching Isaac chase butterflies. "You ever think about that night?" she asked. "Every day," he replied. "It was the worst and best night of my life." She tilted her head. "How so?" "Because losing you taught me how to love you right." Her eyes glistened. "Ethan." He turned to her, gently. "You don't have to say anything. Just know, I'm not here to claim you. I'm here to protect what God gave us, even if it's just peace." She took his hand, the same one that once trembled in the rain, and placed it on their son's tiny shoulder. "Then let's start with that," she whispered. "Peace." We see flashes of their new life. Isaac's first steps. Ethan pushing him on a swing. Amara watching with a smile that no longer hides pain. The rain from that first night becomes sunlight now. Golden, cleansing, full of promise. The narrator's voice returns. Sometimes love doesn't come back as romance. Sometimes it returns as understanding, as kindness, as growth. True wealth is not what we store in banks, but what we restore in hearts. And in the quiet redemption of an ordinary evening, a billionaire finally found what money could never buy: forgiveness. Some stories don't end with a kiss. They end with peace. And that's still love.